Later in the show, in advance of our Ask the Mayor segment with Mayor Mamdani tomorrow, we're just going to open up the phones. That's in around an hour, just for you to plan some questions in advance. You know, obviously, I'm not going to be able to use every question that comes in before the show. We're going to take some live on the phones and in text messages tomorrow, but just to give us a sense of what's on a lot of people's minds with respect to the mayor. So we're going to do an open phones toward the end of the show on if you do get a chance to ask Mayor Mamdani a question, or if you submit a really good question in that call that I will carry forward for you tomorrow, what might that be if you had that opportunity? We'll also read in that segment some of the questions for the mayor that readers of our Brian Lehrer Show newsletter submitted in the last few days. The latest edition of our newsletter invited people to submit questions for the mayor as well. And if you're interested, you can sign up for free for the Brian Lehrer Show newsletter for the future versions. It includes a weekly column from me, a reader question for you to answer if you choose, and some other features. To sign up, just go to wnyc.org/BL newsletter, wnyc.org/BL newsletter. It'll come to your inbox every Thursday afternoon. Brian Lehrer on WNYC. Ask the Mayor tomorrow, New Jersey now. Specifically, two big things happening right now with both local and national implications. The conditions in and protests around the Delaney Hall Immigration and Customs Enforcement Detention Center, and New Jersey primary day tomorrow with at least one congressional seat and therefore control of the closely divided House of Representatives, right, considered very much in play. Early voting ended this weekend. On Delaney Hall, Newark Mayor Ras Baraka yesterday announced a partial curfew following repeated clashes between protesters and law enforcement. Governor Mikey Sherrill backed the curfew. Here she is yesterday speaking at a news conference.
Violent, chaotic clashes hurt everyone. They put the lives of both protesters and law enforcement in danger. They take the focus away from people inside Delaney Hall and their families. And they raise the temperature with ICE.
Department of Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin, who has criticized Sherrill for not doing more to rein in protesters, welcomed the curfew, calling it a, quote, win for law and order. Joining us now, Arya Sundaram, WNYC and Gothamist reporter, covering race and immigration. She's been following the Delaney Hall developments. And Charles Stile, political columnist at The Record, or NorthJersey.com. Arya, welcome back to the show. Charlie, welcome back to WNYC.
Thanks for having me.
Good morning.
Arya, how are things there this morning? Are you on the latest?
Yeah, well, just last night there were several arrests at Delaney Hall after clashes between protesters and federal officers on the scene, and state police as well, and Essex County sheriffs were on the scene as well. I'm hearing that, you can still smell the remnants of pepper spray used over the past couple days.
Remind us of the basics of who's there for people who haven't been following this story and why it's become such a flashpoint.
Sure. So the protests and all the commotion really started about a week ago, a little over a week ago, last Friday, when about 300 detainees inside Delaney Hall started a hunger and labor strike protesting conditions inside the facility. And that's when, at that time, protesters and activists decided that they were going to have an around-the-clock vigil and protest happening outside the facility. Then a few days later, protesters outside created a blockade to prevent ICE from transferring the strikers outside of the facility. They worried this could be kind of a potentially retaliatory move because guards inside were telling detainees this was a possibility. But then as the days went on, more protesters started showing up, more ICE officers starting showing up. And there started to be, like we talked about, violent clashes, again, with several people getting arrested, and eventually state and local law enforcement stepping in.
What's the reality inside Delaney Hall? What's the underlying condition there?
Yeah, so protesters and strikers have really protested the conditions inside, saying that there are a lack of access of medical care, a lack of due process, delays in getting their court cases actually adjudicated. And inside, they're also have been reports of retaliation against the strikers and even other detainees. For a while, visitation was cut off. DHS said this was for security reasons, and it's partially resumed as of yesterday. But then there's also been reports of people inside intermittently losing phone and tablet privileges for several hours, more frequent transfers between the units. At one point, we heard that all the TVs were shut down and removed after people cheered for news reports of the protest outside. One of the strikers, whose wife outside has been pretty vocal about the conditions inside the facility, was transferred to another facility in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And even on Thursday, there was some kind of incident inside of one of the units where the strike has been particularly prevalent and strong, where families allege that guards beat and tear gassed the strikers. Families said it started because the guards were trying to remove one of the detainees. DHS said it was because of an altercation that broke out among detainees. And at this point, activists tell us that most detainees have actually stopped their hunger strike, but many have continued their ongoing labor strike.
Charlie, Arya just said you could still smell the pepper spray in the air a little bit this morning. You spoke with Senator Andy Kim, I see, who was pepper sprayed by federal agents outside Delaney Hall back on Memorial Day after touring the facility. That was a week ago today. So for listeners who may have missed that story, what happened with Andy Kim?
Well, Andy Kim had toured the facility and came out and saw that, in his estimation, ICE was ready to move through the protest. In fact, he was right about this, move through the protest with vehicles, and he saw the makings of a potentially really violent situation. And he also saw guards. He saw one guard an ICE guard on atop a armored vehicle with a pepper spray launcher aimed at the crowd. And he tried to mediate some sort of solution, some sort of an agreement with ICE to maybe de-escalate the situation. He got in between the officers and the crowd, and they began to move ahead anyway, shooting pepper spray bullets at the feet of the crowd, and some of this came up, and he was affected by it. He got stung by it. And so you have a United States senator getting pepper sprayed.
Do you know if he was there on a fact-finding mission or
Yes.
to protest conditions inside or calling for very specific policy changes towards Delaney Hall or from ICE generally?
I think it's kind of a combination of all, really. I think he did go in there as a fact-finding. He came out and said he was appalled by some of the conditions he saw in there, and also spoke to some of the detainees, an 18-year-old girl who was arrested away from her family. He talked about also some of I thought one of the more striking things that hasn't gotten as much attention is the long delays that a lot of detainees are facing in the adjudication process. So they're sitting there waiting in this bubble of uncertainty, and that's causing the stewing, the simmering of anger on top of all the other conditions.
As we talk about the situation at Delaney Hall in Newark, and we will get to tomorrow's New Jersey primary with Arya Sundaram, WNYC and Gothamist reporter covering race and immigration. She's been on the Delaney Hall story. And Charlie Stile, political columnist on The Record. He's been a bit on Delaney Hall, but very much on the midterms, the primary. 212-433 WNYC, call or text if anybody wants to weigh in or ask a question about either of those things. Anybody listening who's been a protester at Delaney Hall, or for that matter, who is an ICE agent at Delaney Hall, or has a loved one being held in Delaney Hall, or anyone relevant to that. And for that matter, who are you voting for? Electioneering, welcome here in the Democratic primary to face Republican Congressman Tom Kean Jr. 212-433 WNYC, or anything else on any of the other New Jersey primaries. 212-433-9692. Arya, just after midnight Sunday, I guess that's Saturday night, Sunday morning, Mayor Baraka, who himself was arrested by federal agents while trying to inspect the facility a year ago, announced the curfew. How much of Newark does it cover? Delaney Hall is one facility, obviously. I see it's 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. for certain areas of Newark. How much of the city?
Yeah, it's actually a pretty small portion of the city. Extends about half mile outside of Delaney Hall on Doremus Avenue. And this is a good time, I guess, to just take a step back, kind of tell you where Delaney Hall is exactly. It's in this industrial corridor of the city with tank farms and warehouses and junkyards and a waste facility and a sewage treatment plant and a power plant and all these really polluting industries. And I'll tell you, I've been there. It smells. There's usually a ton of trucks passing through. And it's also a site of a broken promise of urban renewal. You know, local officials promised a revitalization plan several years ago, but that never came to fruition. And smack dab in the middle of all that is Delaney Hall, and about 1,000-bed privately run ICE detention center that's become a flashpoint in the nation's debates over immigration.
Let's take a phone call. Oh, that caller isn't ready. I'm going to read a text and then go to the phone call. On Delaney Hall, one listener writes, reports are that there's one doctor for 800 inmates, the text calls them inmates, at Delaney Hall. Can this be because it's controlled by Geo Group, a company which profits by incarcerating detainees? Arya, do you have anything on that? I realize that's a very specific question.
Sure. That is what one of the elected officials have said, and what we've heard from elected officials. My understanding is that there are a kind of a set of protocols around ICE detention facilities that apply to both privately run and publicly run ICE detention facilities across the board. But still, I guess at the end of the day, regardless, elected officials have been telling us that detainees there are not getting proper medical care, and this is something that Congressman Rob Menendez has actually been fighting for repeatedly, and really sounding the alarm about.
Arya, here are two sort of conflicting texts. One says, Mikey Sherrill and all news is lying. Protesters have been peaceful. ICE and New Jersey State Police instigate all the violence. But another text says, it seems like a group ready to fight comes in with helmets and goggles, etc., right at curfew. I think there are outside agitators, and Newark should be there to keep protesters safe. And I guess by implications, ICE agents safe. But Arya, what about that? Who are the people who have been violent in these protests?
Well, certainly what state and local officials are saying is that there have been largely peaceful protests, but a kind of small number of people who have taken things to an extreme. Setting tires on fire, throwing things at law enforcement officials, et cetera. But again, on the other side, we're hearing from a number of activists who say that even peaceful protesters, though, are getting caught up in the fray of arrests. And it kind of just goes to show how much this issue has become a flashpoint, and there's kind of both sides with different narratives of the situation.
And yet another texter writes, I question the motives and identities of protesters wearing masks and clashing with law enforcement. They seem like accelerationists and could be from either the right or the left. They're doing real harm to real work by activists and lawmakers' efforts to help the detainees and giving fodder to Trump administration propagandists. Charlie, you're a political reporter. You're not on the ground at Delaney Hall, but right. We heard the clip of Governor Sherrill, who decided that she needed to, react to this, though her instinct, I think, politically would be to rail against ICE and the way people are treated at Delaney Hall, having now to come out against violence at the protests. So I don't know if you have any reporting on whether the accelerationists, as the listener calls them, are coming from, the left, or whether they are, false flag, right, instigators from the right trying to make the left look bad, or what you would say about the politics of this as they pertain to the governor, to Mayor Baraka, even to the primary tomorrow.
Well, as to the first question, I don't have any independent confirmation. I'm not so sure even the authorities do as to actually who these quote-unquote agitators are, a word that seems to imply that they may be right-wing people trying to fan the flames, or but some people on the left take umbrage to that word, as that was a word used during the civil rights movement, that people were coming down south as agitators to stir up trouble in the civil rights movement for a moral cause. So as to the politics, I think it's fascinating. I think that Cheryl, remember, she campaigned on strength as a Navy helicopter pilot who was going to be a new Democrat, not one that's going to be held hostage to the left. She was a moderate. So this has really proven to be a real test of how far she wants to go. I think clearly she doesn't want a recurrence of Minneapolis here. And I think their attitude is, let's nip this in the bud, take some of the heat now, rather than let this become a full-on conflagration. And that goes on, and we're already having national media show up, and but to turn this into Minneapolis, the sequel, would be a public relations disaster. And I thought it was also interesting that the mayor, Baraka, who was not a fan of Mikey Sherrill during the primaries, he even came up to the brink of calling her a racist.
They ran against each other in the Democratic primary for governor.
In the Democratic primary, that's correct. So I think Baraka also understands that the fear of the spillover effect into Newark, and I mean he's also cognizant also of the history of rioting in Newark, which in 1967 led to its kind of structural and moral demise.
Linda in Farmingdale, New Jersey. You're on WNYC. Hi, Linda.
Hi, Brian. Thank you for taking my call. I'm calling because I believe your reporter might be a little misinformed. There have been protesters going to Delaney Hall, as I understand it, since last fall. I have friends who went this winter while I was away, and I started going in April. I've only gone there 3 times. When I've gone, it's been on Fridays, and there have not been a lot of protesters, and we have been very peaceful, and our aim is to get the trucks to honk their horns so the people inside will know that there are people out there who care for them. I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional about this. Last Friday when we went, I was dumbfounded by the amount of police and ICE agents and, of course, reporters that were all over their place. There weren't that many people there protesting. We were there for our 2 hours, and then we left. But there were rumors while I was there that the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys were coming the next day, and I have a feeling that might have been what caused so much of the issues with the police. I'm glad that there's a curfew. I'm glad that they're taking precautions, but anything I have seen has been very peaceful, and people just want these people who are incarcerated to be given a fair shake. It's
Linda, you mentioned at the beginning of your call the cars honking as they go by Delaney Hall to indicate their trucks to indicate their support for the people being detained there. And we have a text from a listener, very, very sad if true in this respect, who writes, "My sense is that Governor Sherrill and Mayor Baraka have effectively killed the protest with the, quote, First Amendment zone and the curfew. The migrants can't hear our chants of support and therefore might be demoralized."
Yeah, and I will say I wore a mask on Friday because I have a sinus infection, and I know what the air is like there. Although last Friday there were a lot less trucks allowed through, so the air was a lot cleaner. But it is, when you're there, I can understand people wearing masks because it is very gritty, and breathing is not easy.
Linda, thank you for your call. One more. Michaeline in Teaneck, you're on WNYC. Hi, Michaeline. Thank you for calling in.
Hi, Brian. Love your show. Brian, I have been going to Delaney Hall since before it opened in May of last year. And I'm one of the people who don't consider myself a protester. We are there to support the families. I'm really distressed that there is so much attention on these people who have just come in and are making a lot of noise and making our job hard, if not impossible. Visitation got shut down. I visit a man on Tuesdays inside. I only go twice a week. I have other work that I do. And we do things like we first of all provide food for the families that are coming to visit. We provide diapers for them, grocery cards, because many of the people incarcerated are the breadwinners. So this whole thing got so out of proportion, and the focus is on the wrong thing. What we care about is the people inside and their loved ones who are trying to visit. And it's just so frustrating to see all the press down with the protesters who are Johnny-come-latelys to this thing.
What do you see when you go in on Tuesdays?
You mean since the protesters came?
No, prior. What you're trying to emphasize?
Oh, prior. Okay, prior to that, on Tuesdays there would be a woman with an electric grill grilling hot dogs for the visitors. There was another chef who came and made food. Other people just come with prepared food. Then usually after the visits, the people come back to the tent, which the county supplied for us, and they can get diapers. We have little toys for the children to take and things like that. So it was all very supportive of the visitors and supportive of the people on the inside. And now it's not that anymore. It's making our job hard to do.
Thank you for your call, Michaeline. We have one more first-person story, so I'm going to add one more caller. Stephanie in Maplewood, you're on WNYC. Hi, Stephanie. Thank you for calling in.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for taking my call. So I went on Friday. I misspoke to the question. It wasn't Thursday. I went on Friday with my son for about 2 hours in the afternoon, and on our way on Route 78 from Maplewood to Newark, we saw the horses being brought in from the with the state police. So we were sort of neck and neck with them as we went to park. I'll rewind. The reason that we went was because a dear friend of mine's longtime cleaning lady's husband is incarcerated at the facility, and she had called my friend and said, please do it whatever you can to get the word out that there are worms in the food and mold in the food and pregnant women who are not getting the care they needed. So that's why we went on Friday. Friday was quite peaceful. Like the caller said before, very gritty air. I didn't wear a mask, but I was like chewing the grit for hours afterward. And as we were going back to the car, the mounted officers were across from our vehicle. And I just said to them, guys, it's pretty peaceful over there, to sort of try to like let them know that there wasn't anything crazy going on. But my son went the following night after he worked, and it got a little wild, and he ended up being on the front line against facing off with the New Jersey State Police and was pepper sprayed and knocked around. He's fine. But he said that it wasn't possible for him to step back away from the line. It just all happened so quickly. And that there were people behind him that were throwing things, but he and the people with him were not antagonizing at all. And then he went yesterday to see if he could protest outside of the perimeter that had been set up. And it was so locked down on every side that the cars couldn't get within a mile without being, it seemed like the officers were trying to get people to cross whatever extra line there was, so they would arrest them right away, so they did not stay. There was, he said, right in front of the car, 4 different like SUVs lined up perpendicular to the street. So they got out before the last one locked them in and came back home without protesting last night.
Stephanie, thank you so much for reporting you and your family's experience in such detail, and I hear the emotion in your voice. And Arya, we're going to run out of time soon, but I'm so glad that we were able to take some calls because like 2 out of the 3 last callers were in tears. And so if the news coverage is just about, clashes and curfews and politics and et cetera, we hear how personal it is.
Absolutely. I mean, this is an emotional issue, and I think one of the most important things we can do is at this moment is continue to focus on the demands and the conditions of the people inside the facilities, as a number of these callers were talking about. And I know you mentioned earlier, just to be clear, visitors have been coming and immigration advocates have been coming for quite some time, for months now, actually providing care to the families visiting detainees inside. It's just a matter of a little bit over a week when there's been these kind of round-the-clock protests that have actually been happening.
Right, and Mayor Baraka himself got arrested there sometime last year, right?
Absolutely.
So, Charlie, before you go, just more briefly than I thought we were originally going to do, tomorrow is primary day. The big one is the Democratic primary in Congressional District 7, which Trump won by about 2 percentage points, only 2 percentage points in 2024. And the Republican is Tom Kean Jr., the incumbent congressman, who is seen as vulnerable. And you note there's no independent polling on the race, but from articles I've been reading, Rebecca Bennett, who is a former U.S. Navy helicopter pilot, among other things, is seen as the front runner. What can you tell us?
Yeah, she is the front runner. She raised the most money, more than $3 million. No one's Tina Shaw, the doctor from Westfield, has about $2 million, but she loans some her own private funds. Her internal poll shows her up with maybe 16 points against the rest of the field, which is all bunched together. So that on paper looks to be a comfortable spot, but a position to be heading into tomorrow. However, Shah has run a series of really hard-hitting negative ads, shattering the decorous, wealthy suburban district that it is, and attacking Bennett for her past registration as a Republican and for taking money from ICE contractors. When you look at the thousands of dollars that she's gotten, which really comes down to $2,500 out of $3 million, it's not really the kind of amount of money that bribes a congressman into their position. But nonetheless, those ads are pretty hard-hitting. It's hard-hitting enough that Bennett felt compelled to respond with a counter ad saying those Shah's ads are lies, they're smears, and because she knows that I'm the best position, blah, blah, blah. She had to push back, which was interesting. Normally, someone with a 16-point lead doesn't feel a need to do that, but let's remember, Bennett is not a known commodity in the same way that, say, Mikey Sherrill was. She's still a newcomer to a lot of people, so there might be some damage that comes from Shah's attacks. We don't know. I mean, and one thing I have to say about Tina Shah, she's very disciplined in her message.
So, listeners, if you're in that district and are voting in that primary, it matters your vote one way or another. So do your homework if you haven't yet, and show up at the polls tomorrow if you haven't already voted. There's also, which we don't have time to get into, 12 candidates running to succeed Bonnie Watson Coleman, who's retiring. That's more of a safe Democratic district. So whoever wins this primary really is going to be the next member of Congress from there. But there we leave it for now. We'll, of course, come back to this during the week. Charlie Stile, political columnist at The Record or at northjersey.com, same thing. WNYC and Gothamist reporter Arya Sundaram, thank you both very much.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome.
Brian Lara and WNYC. Let's get some news headlines now from Michael Hill. Hi, Michael. What's happening?
Hi, Brian. New Yorkers who don't meet new federal work rules will lose their food assistance benefits, known as SNAP, beginning today. WNYC's Karen Yee explains.
SNAP recipients between 18 and 64 years old had 3 months to meet new work requirements imposed by the Trump administration, or else lose their benefits. City officials estimate about 43,000 people are at risk of losing their aid by the June 1st deadline because they haven't yet shown they are working in school or volunteering. City data shows most of those at risk are men under 35 years old. The Human Resources Administration, which oversees eligibility, says it's not too late to take action, even if your benefits have already been turned off. The city has set up resources for volunteer opportunities and says SNAP recipients can get their benefits back if they show they're working toward compliance.
Governor Kathy Hochul joined thousands of marchers on Manhattan's Fifth Avenue yesterday for the annual Israel Day parade. She says New York will always be a place where people can practice their faith free from harassment.
We'll always be that bastion, that beacon of hope for others, to be able to live the way they want to live and practice their religious belief freely from harassment.
The parade came as Mayor Mamdani skipped the event, breaking with a long-standing tradition for New York City mayors. Upper 60s now with partly sunny skies on this June 1st. Slim chance of some scattered showers mid-afternoon today. Becoming sunny, a high near 74 degrees. Then tomorrow sunny and 77. Wednesday we hit 81 degrees, and by the end of the week and into the weekend, we'll be in the 90s. Michael Hill, WNYC News.